India has been playing a significant role in rebuilding Afghanistan, but peace remains elusive. With the Taliban gaining ground in that country, it still controls 40% of Afghanistan. Today, for the first time ever, India has joined talks with the Taliban in a bid to end the war in Afghanistan. India is one of the 10 countries attending the second Moscow conference. Here's more on the state of play at these talks.
The Russian capital is witnessing the latest attempt to end the conflict in Afghanistan. The long-awaited peace summit is being held after many delays. The event, opened by Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, has delegations from the government of Afghanistan and 11 other countries, including India. These deputy foreign ministerial level talks organized by Russia also has leaders from the Taliban in attendance. It's the first time ever that the Taliban's political wing, based in the Qatari capital of Doha, is participating in a peace process. Putting speculations at rest, India announced that it is indeed participating in the summit, but at a non-official level, and that it supports all efforts at peace and reconciliation in Afghanistan. India's Minister of External Affairs, Sushma Swaraj, confirmed the country's participation in the multilateral peace talks.
It was decided by the government of India that our participation will be at the non-official level. In our policy on Afghanistan, which we have articulated and which has been consistent for quite some time now, that we will be supportive of any process in Afghanistan, where Afghanistan is a participant, they are party to that process, and they also have a stake in the process, which means that any process which is Afghan-led, Afghan-owned and Afghan-driven.
Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid has said, and I quote, "Taliban's political envoys will attend the meeting, but the participation does not mean they will hold talks with anyone. This is a meeting to debate the current situation in Afghanistan," unquote. This will be the second time the Russian government is attempting a peace process for Afghanistan by bringing regional powers together. Moscow had proposed to hold the multilateral summit in September this year, but the meeting was postponed at the last moment after Afghan President Ashraf Ghani rejected the invitation on the grounds that talks with the Taliban should be led by Kabul. This time around, a 4-person delegation from the country's High Peace Council has been sent to attend the meet. Bureau Report, Wion, World is One.
And joining us now is Wion's correspondent in Moscow, Dan Ashby. Good evening, Dan. It's a significant first, but there's a fair bit of skepticism given the fact that the Ashraf Ghani government is not part of these talks that are aimed at exploring peace in Afghanistan.
Yes, it is an unprecedented step in a way, as you've said there, because they've got two sides in a sort of fashion around a table. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, coming out saying this was a true chance for peace and that they should keep in mind the hopes of the Afghanistan people. But as you rightly say, the Kabul government itself was not here today. It was the HPC, the High Peace Council, which is a reconciliation body which is backed by the government, but it's not the government itself. And the Taliban made it clear that these weren't direct negotiations between the two sides. They are still not prepared to do that with the Kabul government. And of course, the US wasn't really here in Moscow in a huge capacity. So an initial symbolic step, but not substantive talks yet.
And what role is India expected to play? The government has sent former diplomats and not official representatives. Nonetheless, it's a departure from the past for New Delhi.
Yes, exactly. India coming in an observation role, as other countries have done. Their statement was interesting today because they mirrored some of the words which the Kabul government has said all along, saying that this process has to be driven by the Afghan people. It has to be led by Afghanistan. And I think Kabul were quite irritated with Moscow in a way because they felt that they were left out a little. They didn't play a leading role in these talks. And these Moscow-inspired peace talks have been a bit of a sideline to the US efforts, which are, of course, closely aligned with the Afghanistan government. So I think India playing a safe hand and saying that it will do what it thinks is right for the Afghan people.
And what is Russia expecting out of this?
Well, for Russia, at the moment, this is win-win because it's just another example of where they are flexing their new superpower muscles, if you like, showing that they are much more influential than they were, say, 15 years ago, and just getting these key peace talks that are so crucial to the region, outflanking the US on this example, being the first superpower to get two of the sides together in a fashion. So they want to show that they are important to the region in helping run the region, helping solve the region's problems. But also it's a way to sort of turn a shoulder to the US. They want to see the US troops out of Afghanistan more than anyone else, perhaps. So there are some of Russia's interests at heart when they called these talks here in Moscow.
We'll wait for the outcome. Dan Ashby, thanks very much for joining us from Moscow this evening. It's the latest phase of a battle for influence with China in the South Pacific region. Australia, Taiwan and Canada have simultaneously announced steps to bolster their presence at a time when tensions in the South China Sea have been on the boil. Let's begin with Taiwan. The country's president, Tsai Ing-wen, commissioned two US-made Perry-class guided missile frigates into service at a naval base in the south of the island. These two Perry-class warships have been renamed as Ming Chuan and Feng Chia, and they will be deployed to patrol the Taiwan Straits.
面对着跟过去截然不同的安全挑战，对岸在区域周边的军事行动，不仅试图削弱台湾的主权，更将破坏区域的和平稳定。除了传统上的军事威胁，另一方面来自于境外的非传统威胁，特别是中共对台的山寨。 日益显著。
Beijing, in fact, which has never renounced the use of force to bring Taiwan under its control, considers Taiwan as a breakaway province of quote-unquote one China, as they call it. The Taiwanese democracy has gained symbolic importance as China has become increasingly authoritarian and moved closer to a one-man rule under Xi Jinping, the president of China. Joining Taiwan's efforts in ramping up militarization in the South China Sea is Canada. Canadian frigate HMCS Calgary has taken part in war drills in the Indo-Pacific.
East China Sea rarely represents the largest concentration of military hardware in the world. There's certainly a lot of geopolitical interest in the world with what some of the local nations are doing, and Canada represents an interest in international rule of law and adherence to the freedom of the seas. You know, it certainly shows that we are continuing to be more interested in how things are progressing to this point.
The Canadian warship is now docked at the naval base near Tokyo. It left Canada in July on a mission that has taken it through the East China Sea to Australia and into the contested South China Sea, where it encountered curious Chinese warships. While Canadian presence in the South China Sea is set to remain persistent, Australia too is looking to counter China's rising influence in the South Pacific region. Canberra is set to offer island nations in the Pacific more than $2 billion in grants and cheap loans to build infrastructure. These measures have been designed to bolster the economy and security of these islands. It's worth mentioning here that these sparsely populated countries control a huge part of the resource-rich oceans. Meanwhile, Australia is also trying diplomacy here. Foreign Minister Marie Spain has held bilateral talks with Chinese State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi. These talks are aimed at resetting the troubled diplomatic equations between the two countries. Ms. Spain is the first Australian foreign minister to visit Beijing in almost 3 years after tensions erupted over the passage of foreign influence laws and Australia's criticism of China's militarization of islands in the South China Sea. Also talking are Washington and Beijing. In the thick of the trade war, their top diplomats and defense chiefs will be meeting in Washington later tonight, looking to lower tensions on other issues that have put a chill on relations between the two world powers. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Defense Secretary Jim Mattis will meet their counterparts Yang Jiechi and Wei Fenghe at the State Department. These talks were due to be held in Beijing last month, but were postponed after Washington announced new arms sales to Taiwan and The US and Chinese vessels came close to colliding in the South China Sea. The rescheduling of this dialogue signals an effort by the two sides to contain the slide in the relationship. China also views this as a scene setter, if you may, for the upcoming meeting between Trump and Xi. The two presidents plan to meet on the sidelines of the G20 summit, which is being held in Argentina at the end of this month. China and the United States have put tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars of each other's goods. Donald Trump has threatened to tax the remainder of China's $500 billion exports to the United States if the trade dispute is not resolved. The west coast of the United States has seen some hard times in the last few months. 17 odd wildfires devastated vast acres of land and affected millions of lives in the months of August and September. Natural disasters and freak weather has wreaked havoc in the country, and California is battling 2 more wildfires at the moment.
Orange flames engulfed acres of forest land across the state of California. Fierce and wind-driven wildfires charred hectares of forest land. 8,000 acres were turned to ash in Ventura County, just north of Los Angeles. Tens of thousands of homes were evacuated as the blaze showed no sign of abating. It also forced the closure of a stretch of Highway 101, a major north-south route.
The challenge also for us is that we are at the beginning of a significant Santa Ana wind event that will last a number of days. Right now we have somewhere between 400 and 500 firefighters on scene, many more on request and will be coming in. Obviously, we have another fire in the East County that we are trying to share resources with.
Another fire, dubbed as the Camp Fire, started near Camp Creek Road, just north of Sacramento. Paradise City, a town of about 27,000 people, was completely destroyed. Strong winds and dry conditions spread the blaze quickly across several towns in the Sierra foothills. Flames as high as 50 feet were recorded in the town of Paradise. As fire ripped through residential areas and flames leapt from hospitals and schools, roads were clogged with burnt-out vehicles and abandoned police cars. Residents rushed to leave towns as fire engulfed both sides of the road leading out. Smoke turned the daytime sky black in the area as hundreds of firefighters from across the region raced against time to battle the flames, from both the ground and by air. The blaze destroyed everything in its way, injuring a few civilians. Within 6 hours, the blaze had spread to close to 70,000 square kilometers. This week's blaze is one of the 14 currently active in California. In September this year, hundreds of homes were evacuated in Wyoming in the United States. A month before that, in August, California's holy fire was burning out of control in the Cleveland National Forest. The state of California has had an unfortunate history of devastating wildfires. Bureau Report, Wion, World is One.